Welcome to This Explainer. I am so thrilled to have you here with us today as we journey back into the gritty, earthy reality of the Bronze Age. You know, when we look at this ancient world, a world completely defined by conquest, survival, and asserting dominance, we often tend to overlook the figures who just don't fit into that loud, aggressive mold. And today, we're looking at exactly that kind of figure, Isaac. But listen, we are not going to look at him as some passive placeholder just caught between the towering legacies of his father Abraham and his son Jacob. Instead, we're going to explore Isaac as a profound, brilliant study in submitted strength. It really raises a fascinating question right off the bat. What if the quietest patriarch was actually the strongest? We live in this modern culture with a massive, undeniable bias toward action, hustle, and making things happen, right? We naturally tend to view silence or waiting as a weakness. But what this explainer is going to reveal is that Isaac's silence wasn't emptiness at all. It wasn't a lack of agency. It was actually a highly calculated, deeply powerful strategy of trusting a promise he didn't write. Let's explore exactly how that strength unfolds. Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1. The child of impossibility. So Isaac's entire story begins in a way that totally defies human action. It doesn't begin with a man conquering a city or building up a massive fortune. It actually begins with laughter in the face of the impossible. Literally, the very name Isaac means laughter. His parents, Abraham and Sarah, were well beyond the natural horizon of having children. Everything about Isaac's existence depended not on what human effort could produce, but entirely on what God had to give. He doesn't initiate the Great Covenant. He inherits it. Isaac is the very first person in Scripture who has to live entirely within a promise that wasn't originally spoken to him, but spoken over him. He doesn't have to fight to move toward the promise. He begins his life right inside of it. Moving right along to Section 2, the submitted son. This brings us to arguably the first defining bookend of his entire life, the moment at Mount Moriah that silently structures everything else Isaac will ever do. Now, it's absolutely crucial to remember that Isaac is not a helpless infant being carried up that mountain. He is a young man. He walks up carrying the heavy wood for the sacrifice himself. And he's observant. He looks around, perceives exactly what is missing from the sacrificial pattern he's been taught his whole life, and he asks his father, "Where is the lamb?" He is fully aware, and more importantly, he is fully capable of physically resisting what happens next. But he chooses not to. You see, his silence here is not emptiness, it's consent. There is literally no recorded struggle, no desperate cry for escape. He is the chosen son, the singular bearer of the promise, and he willingly allows himself to be placed on that altar. This quiet, unrecorded consent makes Isaac an extraordinary prototype. He becomes this incredible shadow of the ultimate son, Jesus Christ, who would later be given up in intention and reality. In both cases, the defining feature isn't just the physical act itself, but the willing submission within the act. That takes us to Section 3, Love, Loss, and Restoration. Now, Isaac's life is deeply relationally anchored. To really understand him, we have to look at the immense, quiet emptiness left behind by his mother Sarah's death. When Rebecca eventually arrives, Isaac doesn't just go out and build a new home. He brings Rebecca into the tent of his mother. And this isn't just a standard ancient marriage arrangement, okay? This is the beautiful intersection of loss and continuity. The tent represents Sarah's presence and her vital role in the household. So by bringing Rebecca there, Isaac is allowing love to become a source of true healing. Rebecca isn't simply a replacement for his mother. Her arrival is the exact moment where grief meets restoration, and Isaac's broken relational world is finally reconstituted. Which brings us to Section 4, Inherited Trauma and Wisdom. So Isaac marries Rebecca at 40 years old, and then, well, nothing happens. For 20 long years, they face complete infertility. It isn't until he hits 60 years old that the twins, Jacob and Esau, are born. Just think about the profound irony here for a second. Waiting 2 decades for the child of promise, when you yourself are the literal child of promise. The sheer, unyielding discipline of his waiting is just incredible. And this brilliantly illustrates the generational learning in Isaac's life. When his father Abraham faced barrenness, he panicked and opted for a human solution, intervening through Hagar. And we know that resulted in painful, long-lasting household division. Isaac lived in the immediate fallout of that mistake. So what does Isaac do when faced with the exact same problem? He opts for a vertical solution. He relies entirely on spiritual petition. He flat out refuses to amend the covenant contract through his own human agency. He waits on the author of the promise. The text actually says Isaac entreated the Lord, and it uses this really fascinating Hebrew word, atar. That word absolutely does not mean passively twiddling your thumbs and just hoping for the best. It means an intense, urgent, and earnest plea. It is a forceful, highly active engagement with the divine. Isaac's waiting was not a sign of weakness. It was an intense, active form of covenantal discipline. He fought his battles vertically. But of course, this source material keeps these ancient figures incredibly grounded in human reality. Facing a severe famine in Gerar, Isaac is suddenly seized by fear that he'll be killed for his beautiful wife. So what does he do? Well, he defaults to his father's exact and, frankly, terrible defense mechanism. He repeats the lie, claiming Rebekah is his sister. It's a striking moment that shows us he didn't just inherit the covenant, he also inherited his father's trauma and survival logic in a moment of daily crisis. Yet Isaac's ability to learn and adapt really shines through in his conflict resolution. When the locals become envious of his massive wealth and start aggressively stopping up his wells, Isaac executes a brilliant legal strategy. Step 1 is esek, which literally means contention. They fight, he names the conflict, and he just walks away. Step 2 is sitna, meaning opposition. Again, he doesn't go to war over it, he simply moves on. Step 3 is rahobath, meaning room. He finally finds peace. He moves from defensive manipulation to assertive peacemaking simply by outlasting the opposition. What Isaac is doing here is acting as the custodian of a legacy. He isn't out there digging random new wells. He is intentionally redigging his father Abraham's wells. By doing this, he validates the past, connects the generations, and establishes a permanent legal title to the land itself. This is really the ultimate case study of the meek inheriting the earth. Isaac asserts his presence not through violence or endless litigation, but through quiet, unstoppable consistency. And you know what? Eventually, the very king who pushed him out comes crawling back to him asking for a peace treaty. Finally, we arrive at Section 5, the final surrender. We're now entering the final years of Isaac's life, and we find a household totally divided by the tension between his two sons. God had spoken a very clear word over Rebekah before the twins were even born. The older shall serve the younger. But Isaac, acting as a human father, developed a deep, natural preference for his older son Esau. Esau was a hunter, a man of the field, this perfect expression of tangible, immediate strength. And because of this natural affection, Isaac quietly resists the divine decree. He plans to secretly give the irrevocable blessing to Esau. So the crucial point is when Rebekah intervenes. She sends a disguised Jacob in Esau's place, creating just unbearable tension in the room. Isaac notes the horrifying divergence of perception and reality. He literally says, the voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau. His senses are failing him. Perception and reality are diverging wildly. He senses the deception, he hesitates, he questions, but then he proceeds anyway. He gives the irreversible blessing to Jacob. When Esau finally arrives and the whole truth is exposed, the text says Isaac trembled violently. And listen, this wasn't just surprise. It was the terrifying recognition that something had happened completely beyond his control. His own will had been entirely bypassed. Yet, despite his absolute terror, his response is resolute. Indeed, he shall be blessed. Once again, just like a lifetime ago on the altar at Mount Moriah, Isaac completely surrenders his own will to a deeper, already determined outcome. He yields. Looking back on it all, Isaac truly is the prototype of attitude. His entire life was defined by trust without full explanation, participation without demanding control, and surrender without resistance. Isaac's true strength was never the power to aggressively assert his own way. His profound, disciplined strength was the incredible ability to yield when necessary. He is the man who didn't shape the promise, but he had the immense fortitude to not break it. Which leaves us with a pretty profound final question to chew on. In a world absolutely obsessed with asserting control, what power lies in the quiet discipline of yielding? Isaac shows us that true sovereignty doesn't always have to roar. Sometimes it looks like patiently redigging old wells, intensely praying in the quiet, and trusting a promise enough to completely surrender your own plans to it. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this challenges how you view strength and legacy in your own life. Keep exploring, and I'll see you next time.